Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer quick match gameplay. So for my lord I did decide to run Kholek. Kholek of course is just a very powerful lord, basically just laid smack down on the Beastmen. He does of course come in with too bad. Standard die, as well as Star Crusher, just to dish out a lot of hurt. Of course Foe Seeker. And one of the reasons I brought his feet, he's got an 80 speed, which is actually faster than most heavy cav. And against Beastmen, that's useful because it means he can outpace a lot of the monstrous units that Beastmen can sometimes blob and try to assassinate your lord. So something like a bunch of Gorbulls or those sorts of units, Kholek can run away from him. And that's the main, if there's too many of them, and if there's not, then he can beat him down in a 1-to-1. So that's kind of why I brought, and plus he causes terror. So just kind of a nice combination of good traits. And of course he's very resistant to the ranged fire. So with the buff to his armor, which is now 100, as well as the fact that he's built in 25% missile resistance, means that Ungor Raiders are doing very, very little damage to him. Alongside him, I didn't bring a Chaos Sorcerer Fire before. This was Fire obviously isn't the strong against Beastmen, who do have Morgur as a very, very common pick, as well as now the Butchers of Kalkengard, both of whom have regen. He can be very powerful. You get Kindle Flame, Flaming Sword of Rune, and I also brought the Fireball. It's a nice, fairly cheap utility spell, and just a useful damage spell is what I'm trying to say there. And the Cascading Fire, just for the extra melee defense, if I need the unit to survive a little better. My front line, I was expecting Vestigors, and there's definitely a bit of mind games going on with Beastmen. Beastmen have to assume that the cast will bring some armor piercing, so they do have to. The cheap, cost-efficient counter to Vestigors, Chaos Mirage with rare weapons, are very susceptible to squishy Beastmen units, like Gorge. So it's a bit of a toss-up. It's always kind of a bit of mind games going on. So 3 units of Chaos Mirage do make up my front line. Behind them, to kind of stiffen them up, I do have 2 units of Chaos Warriors with great weapons. And, of course, Demon Spew on one flank and a normal Forsaken on the other, just to kind of flank and cause some damage. And then in the far back, we do have a unit of Chaos Warhounds with Poison alongside Chaos Knights with Lances on both flanks. And these guys, of course, the Chaos Warhounds are just there to support. They're there to weaken enemies and make them easier victims for the Chaos Knights with Lances, who can dish out ridiculous amounts of damage. They have huge charge bonus, very solid weapon strength, huge armor, which means that a lot of the units that Beastmen bring that don't have armor piercing are going to struggle and not really be able to do very much. Plus, these guys cause fear, so once units falling apart, they only accelerate the process. As for my opponent, he brought a bit of an interesting build. He brought Kazrak One Eye on a chariot, which gives him armor piercing, so he can definitely kind of run mayhem through my backlines. Though it definitely makes him a little more susceptible to someone like Kholek. 2 units of Razor Gores. This is always an interesting pick. The War Pigs over here, and definitely looking mean and angry. These guys do have armor piercing, though, very high weapon strength, and a decent charge bonus. They can definitely get in and kind of dish out a lot of hurt. And if you cycle charge them, they can be a real menace. The 3 Ungor Raiders, I think, is a bit overkill, but against someone like Kholek, they can definitely be a bit of a problem. Goreherds, as well as the Blackhorn Ravagers, do make up my opponent's main line of infantry, which is a bit interesting. These guys would not trade very well with Chaos Warriors, but I do assume that my opponent was hoping that his Chaos Spawn, as well as the Baconators and the Blackhorn and the Kazrak One, I would be able to kind of debuff or deal with my armored infantry, while the Gores deal with my squishy infantry. And the Blackhorn Ravagers here, of course, just kind of anchoring the line in the center of it. In the back, Destroyers of Drakwall, just a fairly cheap anti-large option. Wow, that was a terrible line. And single unit of Ungor Spearmen with shields, both fairly cheap anti-large options, just to shut down large and slow it down. Chaos Warhounds with Poison, just to be a nuisance. And Butchers of Kalkengard, and these guys do, of course, cause terror, which is a problem for Chaos, who has no terror immunity. And they have regen, so it could definitely be a bit of a problem. And then on the other flank, 2 units of Chaos Spawn, which is a bit of an interesting pick. You don't see those very often, but they have very high weapon strength, so they do cause poison, so they can definitely debuff my line pretty significantly. As you can see, I do push in, and now I kind of get lucky here. My opponent actually decides to focus my Chaos Sorcerer Fire with his Ungor Raiders, which I think is a bit of a mistake. He would have been better off shutting down the Chaos Marauders with great weapons. The Baconators do just plow into my Chaos Marauders, and they do a lot of hurt, which is definitely a bit of a problem for me. You can see Kazrak is popping Call of Violence just to boost his troops. But once things start bogging down, once it becomes an extended melee, the Baconators will not do as well. Over here, I do overcast the Flaming Sword of Rune on Kholek, who plow straight into the Butchers of Khalkengard, backed by the Chaos Warhounds with poison, as well as Chaos Knights with lances. These guys will simply not be able to escape, and they'll be forced to fight to the death. You can see there's even the Chaos Warhounds with poison are dishing us out some damage, because one of the important things to keep in mind is that Minotaurs have very low armor. They only have 45 armor, so if the Warhounds hit, they'll definitely be dishing out a lot of hurt. Kazrak, in the meantime, has plowed straight through my force and is now being fought by some Demon Spew here. But I see this, so I'm shifting my Chaos Warhounds with poison around, trying to shut him down, hoping to engage with these Chaos Knights. I do drop a Lord of the Storm over here on the Ungor Raiders, but now that the Butchers of Khalkengard have been shattered, I'm pulling back my Knights and Kholek back to deal with Kazrak. And my opponent, who's launched a flank attack on these Chaos Marauders with great weapons, is now going to be engaged by these Chaos Knights, who are going to perform very well against Chaos Spawn, because their armor is very, very high. 120 armor is going to, and very high HP per model, or HP per model, means that they're going to mitigate and tank through most of the Chaos Spawn's damage very well. Chaos Marauders Warriors with great weapons are just going to tear through the Black Orange Ravagers and those sorts of cheap chaff units fairly effectively. Over here, Kholek Sun Eater has kind of beaten down Kazrak. You can see the broken chariot there. Combined with the Chaos Knights with lances on the charge, Kholek is absolutely a monster. Over here now, this means these guys will be freed up and able to re-engage. You can see some of my troops have rallied and they're now marching back into the fray. The Chaos Marauders don't have the best of morale, and so they did rout off when they took some heavy casualties early on, especially from the shock from Razor Gores. But I do think that was a bit of a mistake on my opponent's part. The Razor Gores would have been much better suited against my Chaos Warriors with great weapons. In the meantime, over here, my Chaos Knights are just kind of doing a flanking charge. Granted, this isn't the spears, but because their armor is so high, and these guys don't have armor piercing on there, and they are being poisoned actually by the Warhounds, then they're simply not really going to be able to dish out that much hurt to the Chaos Knights with lances. And you can see their kill count is skyrocketing pretty quickly. In the meantime, my infantry is kind of collapsing on my opponent's army, which has now shattered due to a mixture of losses as well as leadership loss. Which only leaves really this little pocket of resistance here. I'm casting a Flaming Sword of Ruin. In general, unless it's a unit that you expect to rout, a Flaming Sword of Ruin is best to be cast on a unit and not an AoE, because your opponent can just leave the area of effect and escape. For example, when I cast it on the Butchers of Khalkengard there, on the right flank, I cast it on top of Kholek because I knew that the Chaos Knights would be in there, and the effect gets added to new units as they enter the AoE, so you don't have to worry about it not only proccing on the units that are in the AoE. So that way, I did manage to keep it in, and or keep the probably did more friendly fire damage than otherwise. But you can see these guys, of course, being unbreakable, are going to take a little while to wipe out. So we are going to fast forward through that, and yeah. So you can see the fairly low model count unit, and so 9 kills on those is not bad. You can see they actually gained an entire chevron, which definitely speaks for how much damage they did. These guys gained 2 chevrons and almost 200 kills, but a lot of that was, and these guys, the Chaos Knights are definitely powerful, and against Beastmen, one of the important things is most of their units are very low armor. The only units that Beastmen bring that have, or that Beastmen even can bring that have decent armor, are Bestigors, some of their lords, but not the common ones. Morgur doesn't have the best of armor, and not even the Sons of Goros have such good armor. 70 armor is kind of mediocre. It's decent, but nothing stellar. So against the Chaos Knights, and so they're just a very powerful unit. Kholek, of course, laying the smack. Just a strong load. There's not much to say there. The Kessler survived. Fire was definitely very useful. It definitely sped up the fall of those Butchers of Khalkengard by a decent amount, because of course they were 12% flame, then 20% because they have regen, and stack that on top of the bonus from Flaming Sword of Ruin, and they were getting absolutely annihilated. So the Flaming Sword of Ruin definitely is pretty powerful. That usually the kind of popular fire spell to bring alongside maybe Fireball, Cascading Fire Cloak. The Chaos Marauders did not perform very well, and this is definitely kind of a setup for my opponent where it'll counter Chaos Marauders very well. I do think that my opponent made a bit of a mistake by committing his Razor Gores immediately, because I didn't bring that much armor piercing or that many armored units to the field besides the Chaos Knights. So they were kind of squandered on the Chaos Marauders with great weapons, who will not trade well with Gores. That's definitely a bit of, like I said in the beginning of the video, infantry, and then the counter to Marauders is best is Gores. You will often see it's just a straight front line of coming out. Will do very well as well. But those they can't trade 1-to-1 with Bestigors, so I decided to throw in some of the Chaos to keep things cheap, so that way I could afford the Chaos Knights with Lances, and they definitely performed very well. Forsaken, of course, do very well against Beastmen. Chaos Warriors with great weapons did very well. For my opponent, most of his units got kind of annihilated. I actually can't say any of them did exceedingly well. The shock from the Razor Gorge was definitely very significant. The Chaos Spawn held out very long, and actually it dished out quite a bit of hurt on that flank. Unfortunately, Chaos Spawn don't have armor piercing, and against armored units, such as even Demon Spew or like even the Forsaken, they won't perform that well, much less against something like I bogged him down with. But definitely a good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Quick Match or anything like that, be sure to post it down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one.